The day had been long. On the hill above the Sea of Galilee, the crowds were larger than ever before. Word had spread far and wide of the teacher from Nazareth, the healer whose words brought comfort and whose touch brought release. From the villages and distant towns they had come, young and old, sick and poor, pressing in to see Jesus, to listen to the words he had spoken with such power. That evening, as the sun lowered, turning the sky to hues of fire and gold, the disciples found themselves among thousands, surrounded by men, women, and children who had not eaten. The air had grown thick with worry as the disciples urged Jesus to let the people return to their homes. But Jesus, full of compassion, had told them instead to feed the crowd. They looked among themselves, counting only 5 small loaves and 2 little fish, offered by a boy in their midst. Yet Jesus had taken the bread, lifted his eyes to heaven, and blessed it. He broke it, as he did the fish, before handing them to the disciples to distribute. Basket after basket had gone out, enough to feed every soul till all were satisfied, with 12 baskets left over. The people, amazed, spoke in hushed voices about the miracle they had witnessed, the sign that stirred their hope for a promised king. But as darkness deepened, Jesus knew the time had come to send the crowds away. He also knew the stirrings in the hearts of those nearby, whisperings of making him king by force. It was not yet his hour. Turning to his disciples, he instructed them, "Immediately, get into the boat and go ahead of me to the other side, while I dismiss the crowd." Reluctantly, tired but obedient, the 12 found their way to the water's edge. They climbed into the sturdy fishing boat, pushing off into the evening, the oars cutting through the darkening ripples. Jesus lingered on the shore, watching their forms grow smaller beneath the rising moon, as he sent the multitudes to their homes. When the last of the crowd melted into the hills, Jesus turned from the shore and ascended quietly toward a solitary place above the sea. There, alone in the silence of the hillside, he knelt to pray, pouring out his heart to the Father. The night grew deep and still. Far below, the waters of Galilee shimmered beneath the starry sky. Meanwhile, out on the lake, the disciples rowed against the growing wind. The sea, usually calm at night, began to shift restlessly. The breeze became a heavy wind, pushing hard against the boat, which now strained against the waves. Hours passed. Clouds hid the moon. The men grew weary, their muscles aching as they struggled to make headway toward the other shore. Water splashed into the boat, and the wooden hull creaked under the force of the waves. Time lost all meaning. It was the 4th watch of the night, sometime between 3 and 6 in the morning, when the deep of night is at its darkest and the world its quietest. Yet for the disciples, there was no rest. Exhausted by the wind, battered by the waves, they wondered where Jesus was in this storm, wondering if the dawn would ever come. Then, in the distance, dim and shadowy, a figure appeared on the water. At first, the disciples stared, confusion and disbelief freezing them in place. The figure drew closer, upright, moving atop the heaving waves, illuminated faintly by the lantern's glow and the pale light leaking from behind the clouds. Terror seized them. "It is a ghost," someone cried, voice trembling over the howl of the wind. Others echoed the shout, gripping the sides of the boat, fear flooding their hearts. The storm seemed to rage louder around them in that moment, every wave threatening to engulf them. But then, out across the water, a familiar voice called to them, calm and steady, rising over the storm's fury, "Take heart. It is I. Do not be afraid." The disciples blinked, at once both reassured and unsure. It was the voice of Jesus, unmistakable and filled with comfort. Yet how could this be? A man, walking upon the waves as though they were solid ground. Peter, bold and impetuous, raised his voice above the wind. "Lord, if it is really you, command me to come to you on the water." Out upon the tossing sea, Jesus replied, "Come." Without hesitation, Peter clambered over the side of the boat, placing one foot on the waves, then the other, his eyes fixed on the figure before him. To his astonishment, he did not sink. Instead, he walked, step by step, the waters rippling beneath his feet, the salt air whipping about him. For a moment, Peter's faith carried him. He walked toward Jesus, nearer with every stride, eyes wide with awe. But as the wind howled louder and the spray stung his face, Peter's gaze faltered. He glanced at the roaring waves around him, feeling the storm's power and the sea's depth beneath him. Fear crept into his heart, stronger than his faith. In an instant, he began to sink, the cold water swirling up around his knees, his waist, dragging him down. "Lord, save me!" Peter cried out in desperation. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. He held Peter firmly, lifting him above the waves. Eyes filled with gentle rebuke and love, Jesus said, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Together, arm in arm, they walked the remaining steps back to the boat. As soon as they climbed aboard, the wind died down. The waves calmed. The sea grew smooth and still, as if the storm had never been. Silence fell over the 12, stunned by what they had witnessed. In that moment, awe filled their hearts. One by one, the disciples fell to their knees before Jesus, their voices hushed, reverent. "Truly, you are the Son of God," they whispered, overwhelmed by the miracle they had beheld. Meanwhile, the boat, now steady upon the water, glided swiftly toward the shore. In the pale light of dawn, land appeared ahead. The disciples, exhausted but filled with wonder and gratitude, stepped ashore at Gennesaret. Before long, word spread of Jesus' arrival. People came running from all around, carrying the sick and the broken on mats, begging to touch even the edge of his cloak. Everywhere he went, all who touched him were healed. But though many would remember the healings, the teaching, and the multiplying of bread, there was a deeper miracle that lingered in the hearts of the 12. For in the darkness of the storm, when hope seemed farthest away, they had seen their Lord walk upon the waters and calm the wind with his presence. They had remembered forever the hand that reached out to save, and the voice that spoke peace over their fear. From that night forward, whenever storms would rise on sea or land, the disciples would remember, the one who commands the wind and the waves is with them, even in the darkest hours. And in those moments, faith would grow, steady and sure, knowing that as long as their eyes were fixed on Jesus, no storm was too great, and no night too long. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring Bible stories.